A lot of reef keepers are really into small polyp stony aquariums. You see them all over online forums like Tank of the Months and things like that. And it's no surprise really, an SPS reef can be a striking display of shapes and colors. The problem is, as much as we like them, they don't always like us. An SPS tank can be really difficult, and honestly, not every hobbyist is looking for a challenge. Okay, so why is an SPS tank so difficult to keep? In short, an SPS-dominated aquarium can be a major hassle to maintain. If the reef tank is neglected by the aquarist for even short periods of time, the health of the corals can often take a swift downturn. Sometimes, the occasional colony will suddenly crash despite what appears to be pristine water quality. There's plenty of experienced hobbyists that have struggled mightily with keeping an SPS-dominated tank long-term. This video is all about replicating the appearance of a traditional SPS reef with selections of much hardier SPS corals. When most people describe the requirements of an SPS system, things like high light, high flow, pristine water, rock-solid chemistry, those types of things are commonly listed. The problem here is that they're casting a blanket statement over a wide range of corals, when in reality only a small subset really requires these. Basically, people are taking the requirements of the most sensitive varieties of coral such as Acropora and Montipora and projecting that onto all SPS corals. And in a way it makes sense because if the conditions are right for Acropora, chances are they'll suffice for some of the more hardy SPS corals. The mistake is that many hobbyists are assuming that all SPS require these conditions, and in fact it's possible to have an SPS-dominated aquarium under vastly different conditions. Let's go over some alternatives to fill out an SPS aquarium that are easier to maintain than the delicate Acropora and Montipora corals. To do this, we'll first look at the shapes of these colonies. There's three main growth forms of SPS. There's branching colonies, encrusting colonies, and plating colonies. Let's start with branching colonies. There are a few types of SPS to choose from that fill in adequately for their more delicate counterparts. For example, there's Pocillopora, Seriatopora, stylophora, and even varieties that all have branching variants and are significantly easier to care for. Pocillopora can be kept under a wide range of water conditions compared to more sensitive SPS, and even tolerate some degree of neglect. They have some variation in their growth patterns as well. Pocillopora damicornis, for example, is a branching colony that grows in a bush-like fashion. Pocillopora verrucosa, on the other hand, grows thick, club-shaped branches. Most varieties of Pocillopora are either pink or green in color, but occasionally a yellow variant is found. An interesting tidbit about Pocillopora is that they're one of the few corals that can detach from their skeleton when stressed and recolonize a new location. This process is called polyp bailout. Aquarists sometimes see their colony of Pocillopora struggle and assume that it's perished, only to discover dozens of new colonies growing all over the aquarium about a month later. Seriatopora, or bird's nest corals, grow densely packed branches that terminate in a sharp point. Seriatopora are one of the fastest growing SPS, and it's possible to grow a grapefruit-sized ball of bird's nest from a 1-inch frag within about 6 months. The color of Seriatopora varies from species to species, as well as the conditions that they're grown under. One variety in particular, when grown under low light, develops purple and green polyps with yellow skin. When provided bright light, the entire colony transitions to bright pink, with no trace of purple, green, or yellow. One care requirement that's pretty much unavoidable is the need for flow. Seriatopora requires strong flow because of the growth pattern and that density of its branches. As the colony increases in size, less and less water circulation reaches the middle of the colony, and it's common in the lower flow systems for that middle of the colony to start dying after the coral reaches its critical mass. Stylophora appears similar to Passalipora. However, stylos tend to have more rounded tips, and the spacing of the polyps is more uniform. It's easy to get the two confused, but the care requirements are pretty much the same. Medium to high flow, medium to high light, pretty much the same. Another difference, though, is that Stylophora tend to grow more slowly than either Passalipora or Seriatopora. Varieties, or jewel coral, comes in both a branching as well as an encrusting form. The branching colonies grow thick fingers that terminate in round, smooth tips and often have a canary yellow color. In terms of care, varieties are kind of on the borderline of what one would consider challenging. Their care requirements are similar to what one might expect with some of the more delicate SPS, such as high flow and high light. As I just mentioned, there is an encrusting form of varieties, and that leads nicely into our discussion of encrusting corals in general. The main encrusting coral you see in an SPS tank is Montipora, and it's really difficult to replicate that incredible array of colors, but varieties has some unique features of its own that makes it stand out. It often hosts colonies of brightly colored bisma-worms, for example. Symbiotic relationships like this one between the worms and the coral make the tank that much more visually appealing and interesting. One of my personal favorites among encrusting corals is Leptocyrus. It was somewhat unknown in the industry until about a few years ago, and it's since exploded in popularity mainly due to its intense coloration. Most varieties are a combination of orange and yellow that are so vibrant it almost looks metallic. It's one of the corals that does pretty well in low light too, and in our experience it doesn't really do that well when under really strong light, so it's really suited well for tanks like the ones that we're trying to put together here. The third and final growth form that is typical in an SPS reef aquarium is the plating form. Both Acropora and Montipora have species capable of plating, however between the two, it's much more common in Montipora. It's possible to replicate the plating appearance with scroll corals of the genus Turbinaria, and unfortunately I don't have any videos of those right now, and also certain chalice corals. Now, neither scroll corals nor chalice corals are SPS per se, but they have plating growth forms that can closely resemble that of Montipora. As far as chalice corals go, there's over 10 genera of corals that are commonly described as chalices. While some form fleshy plates such as Mycedium, other types such as Echinopora are wafer thin and grow in a fashion very similar to that of plating Montipora. Now, due to the number of coral varieties described as chalices, it's really difficult to pin down a set of care requirements that suits all members. Some do really well in high light, while others thrive only in the dimmest conditions. Chalice corals tend to shift colors drastically depending on their environment, so some experimentation on the part of the hobbyist is going to be required to find the best conditions for overall health and aesthetics. So that pretty much sums it up. An SPS dominant reef need not be ultra challenging. Much of the recommendations one receives to care for a traditional SPS tank stems from the requirements of two of the most challenging varieties, namely Acropora and Montipora. Those requirements do not necessarily apply to many of the other corals out there, so it's entirely possible to assemble a stock list of robust specimens that share much in common aesthetically with those delicate species. So I hope this video gave you some ideas to chew on if you're looking to try an SPS system, but were hesitant because of everything that you've heard about their difficulty. In any case, good luck and happy reefing.